Hello, my name is Jeremy Chamberlain, and today I'm going to be presenting to you on chronic wasting disease in North America. Premise: Chronic wasting disease, abbreviated CWD, is a disease that affects the cervid family, such as the mule deer, white-tailed deer, elk, moose, and reindeer. CWD is a fatal disease and is spread mainly through the saliva and decomposition. Humans help the spread of this disease by putting out easily accessible food plots and artificial waterers. States all across North America are setting up regulations and measures to keep CWD at a low concentration of infection. The Missouri Department of Conservation is putting out 56 sampling stations in the firearm season of 2017 to try and stop the spread of the CWD into different counties. Missouri has put stricter regulations on certain counties to not set out feeders, waterers, salt licks, and mandatory sampling in 25 counties for deer harvesting. Other states, such as Illinois, the Department of Natural Resources and Agriculture, have made up plans and regulations for surveillance of wild and captive deer. Not just hunters, but the average person that sees a sicko-looking deer or elk is asked to call it in immediately. Since Illinois has implemented these procedures, the rate of the spread has been reduced and is not found in new areas of the state. Background: What is chronic wasting disease? Chronic wasting disease is abbreviated short for CWD, is a prion protein disease also known as transmittable spongiform encephalopathy, or TSE. It is called this because post-mortem appearance of the brain and the large vasculature in the cortex and cerebellum gives the appearance of a sponge. Other forms of prion disease are scrapes, which is in sheep and goats, transmittable mink encephalopathy and mink, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, also known as mad cow disease, and Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is also known as Alzheimer's in humans. CWD affects members of the deer family only, also called cervids, which consists of the white-tailed deer, moose, elk, and reindeer. History: CWD was identified first in mule deer in a research facility in the state of Colorado in the 1960s, and at this time it was known as fatal wasting syndrome. It was first found in the wild in 1981 in Colorado among elk freely running. History continue. By the late 1990s, the disease was found in Colorado and Wyoming in both elk and deer that were free running and captive. CWD at that time was declared an epidemic. History continued. Since then, CWD has been found in free-ranging and captive elk and deer all across the United States and in the following states that you see on the maps. All over the United States: New Mexico, South Dakota, Illinois, Utah, Kansas, Montana, Oklahoma, Missouri, up in the East Coast, Texas, and up into Canada, and free-ranging and captive deer. Eradication procedures have been put into place to try and stop the spread of this awful disease. How is CWD spread, and why do we need to stop the spread? CWD is spread directly through the saliva, urine, and feces. CWD can also be spread naturally through natural decomposition, death after a cervid. CWD prions are found in the spleen, tonsils, brain, eyes, lymph nodes, and spinal cord, so precautionary measures need to be taken. CWD can spread indirectly, also through contaminated soil, vegetation, feed plots, salt licks, or any contact that they can share bodily fluids. CWD is not known to affect humans, but precautions need to be done just in case, because CWD is a slow-acting disease. It can take up to 2 years before any signs of the disease are present. The World Health Organization since 1997 has been trying to keep prion disease from getting into our food chain. CWD needs to be stopped as soon as possible once it is found in deer in the state, because there is no vaccine and no known cure for CWD, and is generally hard to get rid of once it is found in the environment. What does deer that have CWD look like? Well, the picture says it itself. A deer or elk that has CWD may have sickly signs such as underweight severely, walking in repetitive patterns, stumbling around, tremors, or even grinding of teeth. What is the impact both environmentally and financially? CWD puts a major impact on the environment. When found in soil, it can take up to 2 years for the disease to die off. It doesn't take long for the disease to spread. All it takes is where one infected deer or elk leaves saliva or bodily fluids, and another deer or elk comes behind and eats behind it. Financially, deer and elk hunting around the United States means big money and lots of fun for many. Just in Missouri alone, there are 520,000 deer hunters and a total of 2 million people that are wildlife watchers. Deer hunting brings into Missouri $1 million annually. This money helps the economy. Businesses that depend on the hunting season to bring in money are hotels, sporting goods stores, meat processors, and taxidermists. CWD will hurt many people and jobs around the United States if the spread isn't contained or stopped. CWD prevention recommendations: using artificial watering systems or feeders. Areas where CWD has been detected, artificial waters, feeders, salt licks, or deer feeders are generally prohibited. Recommendations in other places to keep CWD from spreading due to artificial waters are: place artificial water systems in places undesirable or where deer can't get to. Change out water often to keep out organic materials. When changing out water, clean out the water with 50% water, 50% bleach solution to kill off any bacteria. Avoid the use of stainless steel and porous materials for construction for watering contaminated structures. And don't set up watering systems or water deer in the first place. CWD prevention recommendations continue. Using scents to attract more deer. Precautions should be made even when using scents, such as urine, because of CWD can be transferred through the urine. If a deer in a farm has CWD and it is unknown and the specimen is taken and sold in the store, then a hunter buys the urine, pours it out in the given area, then the spread can be spread all across the United States. Recommendations to keep CWD down are: use commercially produced scent wicks that are dipped into a bottle of scent and then hung in a twig and a branch. Use scent in resealable containers that can be placed on a stake in the ground or hung upright in a tree to prevent scents from contacting the soil or surrounding vegetation. Consider eliminating the use of urine-based scents altogether by using synthetic or food-based scents. CWD prevention recommendations continue. Proper ways to transport a carcass. Deer carcasses should, once be killed, moved as little as possible to keep the disease in the given area and stop the spread from county to county or state to state. Use processors or taxidermists that practice approved disposal methods. Prevention recommendations continue. Proper handling and field dressing of a carcass recommendations. First, wear gloves, and then seek to minimize contact with the brain, spinal cord, spleen, or lymph nodes by storing them in a sealed plastic bag until they can be disposed of in a landfill. Use knives and utensils dedicated for field dressing. Remove all internal organs. Dress and bone out harvested animal in the field or take directly to the processor. Limit contact between the carcass and the environment by placing a disposable sheet of plastic or cardboard between the carcass and the transport vehicle. Double bag and seal any loose carcass parts. Examples: head, quarters, innards, in transit processing. Use a disposable cutting surface such as clean plywood or paneling. Do not use household knives or utensils. Use separate equipment for each deer. Process individual deer separately. Store the meat in individual places. Minimize contact with the brain, spinal cord, spleen, and lymph nodes. Use designated equipment when dealing with these tissues. Trim meat a generous distance away from the shattered bone, especially near the skull and spine. Avoid sawing through bones where possible. However, if removing the head or antlers, use a designated disposable saw blade. Do not cut through the edible portions of the meat with a blade used to cut bone. Completely bone out the meat and remove all fat and contact tissue. Seal all disposable materials and equipment under the processing in plastic trash bags. Dispose of in a landfill. CWD prevention recommendations continue. Proper ways to dispose of a carcass recommendations are to put the carcass in an incinerator and burn it at 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, or dice the carcass with sodium hydroxide to kill off any CWD. But since these methods are too costly for the general public, recommendations are dispose of a carcass in regular municipal trash or landfill, but make sure it is bagged up really good. CWD prevention recommendations continue. General cleanup. Line trash receptacles with non-porous single-use liners that can be sealed or enclosed. Minimize infectious materials in wastewater drains by removing and disposing of solids and other carcass debris from work surfaces. Equipment and PPE. Pressure wash any vehicle equipment to be moved from the area known as CWD contamination. Properly contain carcass waste in double-lined trash bags and dispose of in acceptable landfill. Properly contain disposable clothing and equipment in double-lined trash bags and dispose of in landfill. Thoroughly wash non-disposable PPE prior to the removal in the contaminated site. CWD prevention recommendations continue. Decontamination of equipment recommendations. Keep instruments and other materials moist between exposures and cleaning decontamination. Soak all appropriate process equipment and surfaces with a 50% water, 50% bleach water solution. Let it soak for an hour. Rinse all equipment and surfaces with clean hot water after soaking in bleach water solution. Conclusion. Management techniques have been set up all over North America to try to slow down the spread of CWD. Conservation agencies ask that if you see or get caught on camera a sickly looking cervid, that you call it in immediately so precautions and suggestions can be made. Throughout my state of Missouri, the conservation agencies is setting up 56 sampling stations in 25 of the 41 counties where hunters that kill deer must present it for sampling. In doing the steps I have mentioned above, you will be helping to stop the spread of CWD so the population of cervids can once again flourish and hunters and wildlife watchers to enjoy. Conclusion continue. The map that appears on this page depicts CWD in North America. The areas marked in gray is CWD and free-ranging population, yellow is CWD and captive facility depopulated, and yellow is CWD and captive facilities current. Now, as avid hunters and wildlife watchers alike, this is where from watching, learning, you can now go out and help by making a difference by sharing what you know. Questions? References. References continue. References continue.